interviewing. You know, that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all Ruby up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
It's Wednesday, my dudes.
Yeah, hold on. So here's the thing. For the first time ever, all of the AIs got our names right when I did the intro the way we did it last week. So if you don't oppose, I'm going to start doing that because for the first time ever, it was like, now we know whom is whom.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Remote Ruby starts now.
Welcome back to Remote Ruby. I'm Andrew Mason, and I'm joined by Chris Oliver. We're here, dude. And I was going to prepare something for this, like a really big montage on your name, and I'll do that next time. So don't worry.
Well, you set the bar high for the next episode then.
We got accused of stealing the intro from Drew Bragg this week. We were like, you stole my intro. And I was like, huh. And he's like, well, to be fair, I stole it from you first from Ruby for All. And I was like, well, I stole it from someone else. So really open source intros. That's what we're talking about here.
MIT license. I can't remember. Is this going to be episode 299?
Okay.
Did we skip recording last week? I can't even remember.
No, we did not record last week.
That's what I was going to say. I felt like we had something come up that we couldn't record.
Which reminds me, I was going to tell you we should record this earlier in the week so that we could have this out this week so that we don't miss it.
Oh, yeah, right.
But, you know, whatever.
Well, we might end up still making it on time. If not, here's the thing. We normally publish on Fridays. But you know what? Nobody's going to care about if we upload it on a Saturday.
Dude,
or
you're cooking
Sunday.
now. You're messing with my perfectionism, and I'm okay with that. You know what's really weird? It bothers me more to publish it on Saturday in my brain, right? This is not a rational thought. But in my brain, it bothers me more to publish it on Saturday than to not publish it at all. That says a lot about me, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that. So we're almost to episode 300 on Remote Ruby. We're almost at lesson number 700 on Go Rails.
Wow.
Which is nuts.
Are you going to make it to 1,000?
Yeah. Yeah. What's another 300?
Number 1,000's got to be lit, dude.
Thing is, 300 is actually a lot more than it sounds. Like, there are times when we publish more, and there are also times when we've like skipped a week. But actually, going from 700 to 1,000 lessons on Go Rails is almost 6 years worth of weekly screencasts. So we would have to like do 6 more years worth.
Damn.
So one of the questions that this reminded me of is a couple people asked, is the Learn Hotwire course that we're working on going to be part of Go Rails? And I was like, with the amount of lessons that I just recorded just for the Rails portion, and that's not even done yet, that is over a year's worth of content for Go Rails. And also the course is like about iOS and Kotlin and Swift and Android and Hotwire native as well. So it's outside of the bounds of what we're like going to cover in Go Rails, but we will keep doing our Hotwire content like normal. It's just like the organized curriculum, the deep dive on everything. We will show how to use Hotwire all day, every day, and all of the Go Rails lessons, because that's like the default in Rails now.
Right.
But this is digging into the source code of Turbo Rails or whatever as well in the course. So like we're doing a super deep dive on it. And by the end of it, it's probably going to be like 2 years worth of Go Rails screencasts every week. And I was like, no, this is in addition to, because we're putting a ridiculous amount of time into it.
This is what we call an upsell. Like this is a separate product. Here's a question for you. Do you offer team licenses? So like if I wanted to buy a license for my entire team, is that an option?
Yeah, we're going to have you email us and then you can just tell us the number of seats and we will send you a custom invoice for it and then invite your team and have everybody set up. So you'll be all good to go with that. Because actually that was surprising that there was quite a few people that were like, we're just going to buy this for our team and use that as training for onboarding any new people, because there's really not good documentation and stuff on things.
That's exactly what I'm going to ask Jamie to do. So I'm like, hey, Jamie, I need this.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, like, as I was recording, it was like, well, here's a weird quirk that I didn't even know. So now we address that in the course, and here and there. We had stuff that we learned while recording it, so it's good. But
When's it coming out?
well, speaking of, it is in early access right now, $50 off. This was a soft launch that I did last night or something. I was like, you know what? We've got all of the Rails content pretty much done. There's a few of the, like, I want to go show you the internals of how turbo streams work and how turbo frames work or whatever from the GitHub source code that I haven't finished yet on that section, but it's like over 50 videos. And I was like, you know what? This is complete enough that we can open up early access for anybody who's itching to get in and start learning. So it is, I guess, my official announcement then that it is open for early access right now. So William's working on the Hotwire native and iOS and Android content. He's recording. He just had a baby though, so he's taking a few weeks off, as he should, and digging back into recording that stuff now. But it's been good. We did 2 or 3 prototypes of, like, the application before I started to record. And then, of course, as I'm recording, I, like, go way off script, and it turns out way better. Because as you get into the explanations, you're like, well, I can't do this without also explaining that. So it ended up really natural. And we actually walk into a couple corners on purpose. You know, the interesting thing about Hotwire is, like, you get all these tools, but it's like you get a hammer and a pry bar, and you can use the pry bar to, like, hammer in nails, but this other tool's better at doing that, and you should probably use that. So that's been kind of interesting to show, because I think there was a few times we go down one direction and it's like, well, that's not as smooth of a solution as you would hope it to be. So we should use this other way of doing it instead. So hopefully it gets a lot of insight into those things and whatever else. Yeah, I'm excited. It's been several months of working on that alongside putting out Go Rails. And I've got as we talked about several times recently, I got my pull request that's almost ready to ship for converting Hatchbox over to Mies, but I will probably postpone that for deployment until after I get back from Sin City.
That's probably a good call, dude. I mean, because every time you open up your phone, it seems like, oh, Hatchbox ticket just came in. And I'm like, huh. So yeah, it seems like a good call.
It's been actually really good lately, except for when ASDF decided to completely rewrite their stuff. So other than that, things are really stable, which has been great. But deploying on a Friday is bad. Deploying on the Friday before you leave for another country to give a talk at Tropical on Rails, and then flying to Philly right afterwards, and then flying to Vegas right afterwards for Sin City. Yeah, that's like deploying on a Friday to the extreme.
Just to feel alive, I merged and deployed something and then got on a plane and turned on airplane mode.
Did it go smoothly?
Well, dude, we use feature flags, so I'm never worried about deploying main.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Ever.
Yeah.
So
if I remember right, my initial refactoring for this pull request was with that in mind, but I think it simplified so much. It was kind of amazing because, like, we had to do some weird stuff to, like, install ASDF and upgrade the plugins and whatever else. And now it's just kind of like Mies does everything. It's simpler. And I think at some point during the refactoring, I was confident enough that I think I was like, I'm just going to delete a few of these old ASDF things entirely because they're just making it really messy in the future. I've seen people do weird stuff because they know that we're using ASDF. Somebody had recently, not to call them out, but they had a tool versions file with Ruby, Node.js, but they also had a plugin for ASDF Bundler, which was weird, and then also ASDF Yarn. And it was like, both of those end up installing stuff that's already like something you should have just installed with the language.
Yes.
So that was weird to me. And I told them, hey, let's not do that because this is not going to be good in the future. And I'm sure there will be people doing other weird things that I haven't noticed yet. But there may be some things like I could just detect that and give you a warning or something. I also am curious to run that through Mies and see like if the tool versions file is detected and it's got ASDF bundler, what does it do? Does it blow up? Does it give you a warning? Whatever.
Right.
I haven't tested that
Because
yet.
there technically is a mapping from that to Mies, right? Because you can Mies install bundler or yarn just like you would with ASDF. But like you said, okay, I can kind of see yarn, not on your
because like
not on your deployment server, but like I could totally see a reason why you would use ASDF to manage your yarn versions, because there are multiple different versions of yarn and some of them do not do what you want them to do. So I could totally see that. Like they're definitely not compatible between 1 and 2 and 3 and whatever. But there's an interesting one to throw in there.
Production monitoring can be complicated. There are tons of tools and techniques, but you just want to know that your app is up and your users are happy. When your customers encounter a problem, you need clear, actionable intelligence, not walls of charts and reams of logs. That's why they built Honeybadger, the monitoring tool you've always wanted, a tool that's there when you need it and gets out of your way when you don't. With Honeybadger, you'll know when critical errors occur and which customers are affected. You'll be able to respond instantly when your systems go down and improve the health of your systems over time. Plus, you can fix problems before your customers can even report them. Honeybadger is the application health monitoring tool built for you, the developer who cares about a quality product and happy customers. Start monitoring today at honeybadger.io. It's free to get started and setup takes less than 5 minutes. Once again, that's www.honeybadger.io.
I'm assuming what ASDF is doing, though, is that they're adding it to the path. And so that's why they're doing that. Is like, I want bundler and yarn to be on the path. And by adding the plugin, I'm ensured that will happen.
Yeah, I guess so.
Unless they're using a weird specific version of bundler and yarn.
But even then, you could just gem install that version of bundler. But for yarn, it makes sense because yarn was kind of like the initial installation I did on Ubuntu was like, use the yarn Debian repository or whatever. And what we do now is we just npm install -g for global and have it install yarn 1, which is like what Rails expects, at least.
Right.
Like you can use newer versions of yarn,
No,
and
you
that's
can't.
fine.
I defy you to try, bro.
We've got customers that have done it.
Really? Because I think me and my project partner have decided that it's just a no-go and we're just going to switch to PNPM instead.
Yeah. I haven't kept up with it, but NPM, I think, had some of the issues.
NPM got way better. So a lot of the reasons why people were using Yarn 1 and not NPM, I think, are now no longer entirely valid. Like there are still some, but a lot of it was performance, and they have done a massive job over there of working the performance because NPM went under GitHub and Microsoft. So
that's right.
A lot of work has been
acquired.
a lot of work has been done over there to improve that tool. But the Yarn Berry, I have never been able to get work. And then there's a newer version that we can't get to work either. So, or with Rails specifically, not with other things. But
I remember some like enable core pack or whatever to like use a newer version of Yarn. And I was like, what happened to the old NPM install and just specifying version 2 and 3 or whatever?
Dude, what's funny is when Yarn Berry, which they've changed the names around. So like maybe that's what they're calling Yarn 2 now. I'm not sure. But originally when it was released, Yarn Berry, I was at CodeFund. So that was 2019 or early 2020. And I tried to get it to work and I couldn't get it to work. And I was like, dang, I can't get the new version of Yarn to work, Nate. And now here we are, 2025. I still can't get that version of Yarn to work.
Oh, man. So I pulled up Yarn's website. It's totally different. This documentation covers Yarn 4+.
Okay, so
the
now the
previous documentation dedicated to 3.6 and below refer to v3.yarnpkg.com. Yikes. So they have 4.7, 3.8.7, and 1.22.22. There is no version 2 listed in their version drop.
Because it was called
We don't
Berry.
talk about that version.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of interesting that Yarn is like on V3, V4, whatever, and Rails is still like, yes, use Yarn 1. We haven't talked about that since, I guess.
Well, there used to be that shim too, bin yarn, and I don't think that's quite necessary
that came with
anymore.
Webpacker, right? I think.
I believe so. That was when that was introduced. I haven't thought of that for a while or really used that. That has been one of our biggest issues for the longest time. And I don't remember what the shim did exactly, at least in the internals, but what happened all the time in Hatchbox Classic was people would check bin yarn into their Git repo. And I didn't realize this until debugging this, but they would check it in, the file would be there, but Git actually keeps track of like the executable flag. And so bin yarn would be unexecutable when they deployed. And that was because the executable flag wasn't on there. So then we would have in our docs instructions on make sure it's the latest copy of bin yarn plus you run chmod plus X and then also commit that to your Git repo. And then you deploy and it runs bin yarn and you're good.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people sometimes maybe forget that the files in your bin folder are just shell scripts that are calling out to Ruby.
Yeah. And you like can just read the source code. All it usually is doing is like, let's first run bundler to change our path so that when you require psych or something, you get the version of psych that your Rails application needs, not whatever the default version is inside of Ruby or whatever. And that's like, boom, done. For the most part, that's like what it's doing.
But Rails 8 has added like a bin scripts folder. Or not bin, sorry, just scripts. And I'm
just
like,
the scripts.
I feel like that used to be in an older version. So like now we have bin.
There was a bin script shim or something, I think, at one point.
It's a common pattern at minimum. I've seen a lot of old Rails apps with a scripts folder.
Yeah, and it's like one-off scripts or whatever that it's for or something.
Okay.
But there also wasn't
I wasn't sure what it's for.
Yeah. When I was working on the Rails Getting Started guides, the scripts folder was in that list of you create a new Rails app. Here's all the files and folders. And the thing that I still didn't have a good answer for was like, okay, what's a good example of why would I use this? What is that for? And maybe it's for things like, in Jumpstart, we have an admin attribute on the user model that's add or read only, so you can't change it. Because if you want to take an existing user and make him an admin, you actually have to go around Active Record to do that safely, because it will protect you from changing that. So maybe that's a good example of that. We have like a little command you just run in the console, but it could be nice to like have a script to enable somebody as an admin, and you give their email address and it looks them up and then marks them as an admin, and you just pass the email address in as a first argument on the command line or something. I don't know. That could be a good use case for it maybe, but I haven't seen many examples.
I did a file path search for bin scripts on GitHub, and like there's a Ruby projects are pulling up and they're all very old. Some of these are 16, some of these are 4, 6. Yeah. It's very interesting. So I'm guessing that's a former pattern.
Yeah, that script directory, I remember being around in like really old apps that I worked on, 2.3 or something. But it's been so long. I'm just so used to bin. It is the normal thing these days. One cool trick I want to mention that reminded me of was the path that you have in your shell. You can use the current directory and do like /bin or something. So you can use the relative folder. Mm-hmm. So when you're in the Rails root, you can have your relative bin folder in your path so that you can type Rails, and rather than it going to the Ruby Gems Rails executable, it'll go check bin first and then run that bin Rails. So it's like the shortcut for you having to not type bin Rails, which I thought was cool. It doesn't really matter in that case because you have Rails as the executable inside of Ruby Gems that knows how to do that. But
they say you should use the bin stub.
Yeah, it's the recommended way. And more or less, I think the Rails executable knows to call that or something. I haven't looked at the source code for that, but that would be fun to see. But this would allow you to just type dev and it would run bin dev for you, or setup and it will run bin setup for you, which is kind of nice. But I don't think many people have that in their path and know that you can even do that, because normally it's like your path is not including the current directory. It's like a full strict list of paths from the root of the file system or whatever.
Right. which
That's a cool pro tip.
I've been deep in my path recently. But you want to be careful with that because if you put everything in your bin directory on your path, you could quickly wind up with conflicting functions by accident. Something as general as setup, for instance, you might not want setup, like maybe inside your Rails app only, that's fine, but just be careful about
and that's probably
where
why
the path is being set.
People don't do it that often or whatever.
Right. When a lot of people use that Oh My ZSH plugin that adds like a specific list of gems, they will try to find the bin stub. And if the bin stub doesn't exist, it'll try to use bundle exec.
What happens when a developer decides to record his own podcast ad? Let's find out. I'm Adam from JudoScale. And at JudoScale, there's no marketing team, no salespeople, and no customer support. I mean, we do have customer support, but it's just us, the developers. That's why our support is top notch. Anyway, we're JudoScale. We're the autoscaler that actually works. We do it better than anyone else by tracking the right metrics and checking those metrics more frequently. And we wrap it all in a beautiful UI with powerful and intuitive controls. We work with hosting platforms like Heroku, Render, and Amazon ECS to gracefully handle your traffic spikes and backed up job queues. If you want that peace of mind and a much lower hosting bill, you should check us out. Visit judoscale.com/remote Ruby for your special gift as a remote Ruby listener. That's judoscale.com/remote Ruby.
Where we wrap up today, I saw a PR today for Rails that got merged to add CI directly into Rails CI directly into
it's like bin CI or something, right?
Yeah, it's a DSL for basically configuring your CI workflows. Like the example is like you put it in config/ci.rb and then ci.run and it has steps, and which
That's
I think
cool. Was that something that I feel like Mike D'Alessio was working on that or something?
Jeremy is the one who made the PR. Beirut and DHH are in the comments a lot. I don't see Mike's name on this.
Remember DHH was talking about we're not using CI anymore. We're going to run it locally and do sign-offs.
Right.
I think Mike worked on the other
related
tool. I think Mike worked on the sign-off scripts or something.
Yeah, there's a GitHub extension for the GitHub CLI plugin that Basecamp owns called GitHub Sign-Off, GH-Sign-Off. It's a GitHub CLI extension for local CLI. Run your tests on your own machine and sign off when they pass. So yeah, and they even mentioned that you want to use this bin CI in tandem with GitHub Sign-Off to set a green PR status when bin CI completes successfully.
Yeah, Jeremy and Mike both worked on GitHub Sign-Off. I meant to play with this because I thought it was pretty cool. I still like catching, because sometimes they're just stupid things that don't run in CI reliably. And it's like, what's the point of trying to maintain the system? Which is why I think they went this route a lot. But also there are times where it's incredibly valuable to have CI for libraries where you need to be able, like, you need to test Rails against MySQL and Postgres and SQLite. And you're not going to want to run all that locally. That would be a huge pain to set up and wait for. This is really designed for like applications where it's like, we know we're only going to run against Postgres in production because that's the only thing we run. We don't need to make it, test it against these extra things. That would be a waste of time and effort and money unless you're migrating to it or something. So this, I think, is awesome for those application tests and stuff. It's pretty cool.
This is also great for people who can run their tests in 5 minutes. So the one thing that you're not going to be able to do is take advantage of all the, you're not going to be able to do the parallel stuff that you could take advantage of across all these different CI runners, which could totally be fine for you.
Call up Jamie, see if he will get you a Mac Studio cluster so you can then run everything in parallel at home.
You know what I am thinking of using this with though, is taking all of our linter, like not the tests because we have parallel stuff. Right now I'm doing like all our linting and stuff in parallel. But I think when you add like the sign up, like the spin up and like all these other costs related to it, it is faster, but not really when you take into account the fact that holds a runner that now can't be used to do something else. So in terms of so suddenly it becomes like a resource management problem. And I've been thinking about taking all of our linter related things and putting them into one single job and only failing that job, like running all of them and outputting all the results and then failing it as a single thing and flagging which one failed instead of doing them all separately. And what I don't want to have happen is standard RB fails and then you don't check Zeit work and then there's a Zeit work bug. So when you push up again, you have to do it all. I don't want that.
I mean, if you're going to run a bunch of those things and they're all fast, why not just run them one right after the other? If you do them in parallel, you're going to spend the cost of booting up the containers and everything the same for all of those. That's going to mean more waiting in the queues to get each one of those spun up. And if you just have to wait for one, then it can do all of that really quickly and you should be good to go. The only downside is you want to make sure that, and I believe you can configure this with GitHub Actions or whatever, where you can do each one of those and they can like,
you can do an if condition that basically always run whether there's an error or not. And that's what you want to do. Like, even if there's an error, you want to continue running the next steps.
Right.
But
like,
you don't want to lose the errors. That's the only thing I haven't tested yet is to make sure that, because I'm using standard GitHub format so that it pushes the annotations, the same with Brakeman. So I need it to still output those annotations the correct way and then still fail the job. So
I think that's not that hard to configure.
No, it's not.
It's just like not the standard way of doing it. Normally you want it to fail on whatever the first thing is so you can address it right away. But you don't want to have to do that where you could see all of the results in parallel and then address them all, where you would fix one, then wait, then fix the next one, then wait, then fix the third one. And like that would take forever to debug several things if there were several issues. So you just have to make sure that you do the configuration correctly. So you still get the same benefits of like it being parallel, yet you don't have to do all that same setup time and stuff.
Yeah. I generally disagree with this practice, but standard takes like 2 minutes to run. And maybe there's something I can do to like, I'm not sure where that time is being spent. I'm not sure if that's in scanning each file and that's just how long it takes and that's just the way it is. Or if there's a way to like limit it spending time in a certain area. So there's possibly something I could do there, but I'm thinking of just running it on the diff files.
You're running it against all your node modules. It's like, what the hell is all this?
I mean, we're running it against a lot of files, but
it still seems awfully long.
Yeah, it does kind of seem long. I might be including like setup time in that. So that's just like in my brain, like I'm thinking of when I looked at GitHub Actions and it says, but it does take like over a minute, I'm pretty sure, to run on the entire code base.
Longer than I would expect. Yeah.
So maybe there's something I can configure better there. Maybe there's some underlying Robocop thing being done. That
I do like the idea of just running it on the diffed files,
which is not
the
hard.
Change files.
The only I've seen that lead to things getting into main before, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, because what could happen there is you need the exception of standard updated in this PR. So we actually need to run it against everything, because I've seen where I will push something, then standard fails, but I didn't change any code. And it was like, well, standard's configuration got changed or whatever.
Really good point. And I'm glad you said that because I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's definitely happened to me many times.
I guess if gem file changes, just run the whole thing over again regardless. I feel like that's probably good anyway.
Yeah, I'm curious to revisit that in here if you do mess around with that stuff, if you were able to speed things up or whatever.
I'll let you know.
Cool.
All
right, man. Well, we'll see you
I'll catch
in
you
the next one.
On the flip side, baby.
All right. Peace.